Hello, Emilio. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kiko. Good afternoon, friends. It's a pleasure to share with you all again. In this section, we will answer questions from the monthly meeting in January of the new annual cycle that we just started. Thank you very much.
Do you remember the title?
What 2025 will potentially bring, and the outlook for the next 5 years. In the years 2025, 2029, during that period, that will lead to 2030. Go ahead.
All right, Kiko. Well, first of all, thank you once again to Kiko, and thank you all for your participation, for being here, and especially to everyone who has taken the time to share questions, concerns, or observations. In line with the presentation, which was just a little over a week ago, we had the opportunity to develop it in this same way. Specifically, we're going to try to answer 63 questions that, once analyzed, we have classified into 10 fundamental sections. We'll start by talking specifically about the New World Order. There are 9 questions that specifically mention this issue. Then we'll talk about technologies, electromagnetic distortions, and transhumanism. There are 5 questions and observations that have been raised regarding this. We'll then move on to discuss extraterrestrials. There are 2 questions related to extraterrestrials. Likewise, in 4th place, there are also 2 questions regarding the decrease or not of the world population. We will continue in the 5th section with other involutive interferences. Questions that refer to this matter. Likewise, there are questions, specifically 4 related to the triumph of the beast, which we will develop in the 6th section of this session. The second, most numerous, is the 7th section. Regarding the number of questions, there are 13 that relate to the transition to the new humanity. The 8th section will be dedicated to the support we have from an evolutionary perspective. There are 5 questions that refer to this matter. In the 9th and final section, we will focus on what has sparked the greatest number of observations, questions, etc., specifically 19, which relate to them, to their own, and us, to our own, and the practice of life, which means that us to our own. And finally, we will close with experiences and shared insights. As we always do, in this case, we have a shared experience mainly around unconditional love and its practice, which you will find tomorrow, just like everything I just shared, in the text that Kiko will send along with the video of this session. Having said all this, if it sounds good to you, let's address all the matters in the order mentioned that you have formulated and raised. We start with the New World Order, and the first question is, what is going to happen to us in light of all this? What do you suggest we can do? Well, this question, being the first, will be what we respond to at the end. We share that the second to last section of this session will be dedicated to them, to their own, and us to our own, and there we will have the opportunity to pause. What can we do in this context of a new world order? What, as this friend here says, is going to happen? Are we going to live it? Are we starting to live it already in terms of its configuration? And will we live it in terms of its consolidation? And regarding what we can do, I insist, we will see that at the moment of the presentation, consolidation. And regarding what we can do, I insist, we will see that at the moment of the presentation. Second question. I understand that the vast majority of the planet's population, it is doomed to be part of this new world order without any remedy. Do you agree with this? Certainly. The new world order is going to be global. The fact that it is labeled as global means that it will affect the entire planet and therefore all of humanity. I agree that most people will live. That this friend is indicating to us. As for the fact that the vast majority of the planet's population is going to live, to put it in the words of the question itself, it is doomed to be part of that new world order, because the new world order has been designed precisely to affect the entire human population. And I take this opportunity to insist on what we already shared a week ago, and it will reappear during this session, with a goal that world order is shaped with a purpose that has nothing to do with power, that has nothing to do with money. Let's not forget that we're talking about a spiritual goal. Yes, it's of a spiritual involutive type. The New World Order, it's the system they want that we have and in which we live, according to the people and the programming they have established, because they believe it's the order that can confuse us the most, that can cloud our consciousness regarding the transition that we don't know when it will happen. But surely the transition will happen, which will bring about the end of this human cycle and the beginning of a new humanity. And the goal of this world order is to confuse. It's to cloud consciousness so that as few souls as possible live, participate, and enjoy that new humanity on earth, restored. We already talked about this in last week's presentation. We will have the opportunity specifically to return to this in the section 7th of this session, where, as I mentioned in the presentation, we will dedicate reflections to the transition to the new humanity, along with the 13 questions you have raised regarding it. Third question. I understand that the vast majority of the population will choose security over freedom, and it will become a cog in the machinery of the New World Order. How could we really judge or blame someone for making that choice? Of course, we are nothing and no one to judge or blame. What we need to be clear about is that in this, spiritual traditions and sacred texts are very, very precise regarding that. The thing is, regardless of whether the New World Order affects the population as a whole, there will always be room for our free will. We will always be able to live differently. We will always be able to make our own lifestyle habits, some patterns, some principles, some values that are not the paradigms, the belief systems and the guidelines and patterns that this new world order wants to impose. So we are really nobody to judge or blame that we are all going to have free will, finally, to decide for one thing or another, to live in conscience or to fall into what is a comfort, a supposed security, not wanting to see what we have in front of us, looking the other way. Those who do this kind of thing will do so because they voluntarily wish to, because we will always have room to maneuver. We have shared in other monthly meetings that precious phrase from Plato's Republic, in that wonderful dialogue of Plato, none other than with Socrates, with his teacher, in the last pages where the near-death experience of the Armenian soldier named Er is described. When Er, in his near-death experience, he reaches the plane of light, he arrives in heaven, in the Devachan. And he even reaches that part, that phase of the heaven of Devachan, where souls are about to reincarnate. It's beautiful, and it's a great truth that is expressed there. When the soldier Er, in his near-death experience, is gathered, I repeat, in the dialogue between Plato and Socrates, it indicates that the souls that are going to reincarnate have a sort of final meeting with the Quieres, a priestess. A wise virgin, and the Quieres addresses them and speaks to the souls that are about to incarnate, calling them for what we are. Transient souls, because that's what we are here. Transient souls. And the Quieres says to them, transient souls, you are going to reincarnate. You are going to reincarnate because you have chosen to, in the context and in the format that you have chosen. And no one has forced you. And remember the following: virtue will always be within your reach. Virtue, consciousness, will always be within your reach, transient souls. Whether you embrace it or not, virtue depends only on you, because God is innocent. Well, in response to the question that this person asks us, I think the reminder of these words fits perfectly. Let's continue. Fourth question. What role does the liquidation of the concept of private property play? Using legal tricks to occupy private homes, the occupation concatenates, indeed, K-shaped occupation of private homes in the elite strategy. How can we exercise free will, losing our sovereignty, our ownership of ourselves? Certainly, in the New World Order, one of the pillars that will be in place and that will spread is that the person is, in quotes, dispossessed of everything by a system that, however, tells them it will give them everything. Everything is taken away from you, and the system claims it will give you everything, which is a big lie. It's a big lie, which is a huge fallacy. And when we talk about everything being taken away, what they want to take away the least are the material possessions. The rest is that in this new world order, they want to take away from us a transcendent vision of life. The perception of what we truly are and what reality truly is, that's really what matters and is most significant, regardless of the fact that, as I know, they will want to have subhuman individuals who have lost the transcendent sense of life and existence, but are still submissive. That submission will come about, among other things, because opportunities for personal autonomy will be taken away, and everything will be governed, will be subjected to the dictates of the New World Order. Now then, as we said before, we will always have some room to maneuver. And speaking of free will, we will always have it. It's impossible for them to take away what we are. They can confuse us, they can cloud our consciousness. They can launch belief systems, paradigms, visions of life like launched by all the media, by the entire institutional framework, by the whole technological and military complex, so that we look the other way, so that we forget, so that we are unable to become aware of our true essence. But however, we will always have that. No one can take it away from us. Whether we have it or not will ultimately depend on us and exclusively on us. Don't let yourselves be disempowered. We are not victims. Please, we are beings endowed with a divine essence. And precisely, it will also come up throughout the response to some question in this session. These events, among other things, are an opportunity more than a threat. They are an opportunity to remember who we are. They are an opportunity for us to value what we are. They are an opportunity for us to live in awareness and in coherence with who we are. Don't fall into victimhood, in defeatism. That's what they want, that we become subhuman beings, servile with our heads down. Let's not allow it. It's important to know what they want precisely so we don't fall in those networks, so as not to fall for that bait. We'll come back to this throughout this session. Fifth question. If more countries continue to join the BRICS, internal struggles could delay plans or even lead to a division of two orders. Different in no way, in any way. Everything related to the BRICS bloc, like everything else that is happening in global geostrategy, they are totally and absolutely embedded in the program and agenda of the New World Order. Let's not be fooled. All of that belongs to the same thing. There is a plan A, there is a plan B. They want to catch us from one side, and if they don't catch us from one side, they want to catch us again from another. A multitude of deceptions, a multitude. Yes, in fact, there are deceptions and fallacies. Let's not be confused. Let's not be mistaken. Knowing what is happening, understanding the signs of the times, should serve us precisely for that. And let's not be fooled that some members of the elite present one face while others present another doesn't mean they are truly in opposition. At most, They are in conflict among themselves to occupy the best positions of power and command in the New World Order. But fundamentally, they are in complete agreement and use the different disguises, the different masks, precisely to deceive us. And if they don't deceive us with one mask, let's see if they can trick us with another. But if we take off the masks, we're seeing the same thing, because they are really the same. Another issue, I don't understand much about politics, someone tells us here, but in the case of Venezuela, isn't Maduro against the regime of the United States? What is happening in Venezuela would practically warrant a monthly meeting. Besides, it's dedicated specifically to the situation being experienced in Venezuela, and in one way or another, though perhaps not as harshly, it is also being experienced, by the way, in other countries. Although the media doesn't refer to it much, I believe we can be sure that any, as I just shared, any kind of the alleged, certainly, of alleged clashes that such a country is against. Such and such, that one person is against another, that this bloc is against that one. If we take off the disguise, they are all participating in the same thing. And of course, the government of the United States and the government of Venezuela are participating in exactly the same thing. Don't forget that in the year 2024, as we shared, foundations for building floors completed by 2030, New World Order established. Of the floors of the building that will be put in place by the year 2030, so that by 2030, the New World Order is configured and established, and in the foundations that were completed in the year 2024, we referred to issues like the pandemic treaty, like the emergency platform, like the Pact for the Future, like the Global Digital Pact, and all those kinds of issues that are fundamental when it comes to laying those foundations that will facilitate the construction of the floors of the building in this 5-year period, 2025. In 2019, no country in the world, none, voted against it, not even Venezuela, not even the United States, not even Argentina. There's a lot of talk about my law, not even Argentina. It's true that Argentina acted on some of the issues I just shared, but it hasn't opposed them. Really, if we go to the United Nations website, he puts on the medal himself, reminding us, for example, that the Pact for the Future has been approved without the opposition of any country in the world. Why? Because beyond the masks, if we take off the masks, we find the same thing. The goal of the socioeconomic system, which controls the institutional political framework, is the same. That's right, among them, at different levels, at higher levels, at lower levels. There are disputes, there are fights, there are confrontations, there are power struggles, but that doesn't take away, it doesn't diminish even a bit what is truly fundamental. And all of that is directed and perfectly organized towards the same goal. 7th issue. Where do religions stand? Church, with its powers of social, economic, and political influence in this prelude to the New World Order. Well, the truth is that, in fact, the major churches are also adapting in various ways to the New World Order. They want to remain important, stay prominent in the New World Order, restructuring. They are adjusting to it to keep their place, even if it means discarding some beliefs and principles. They are adapting to this new world order to continue having a role in it, even if that means throwing certain issues, certain matters, certain beliefs, principles, etc., overboard. That those churches have been able to have, but in the name of survival and continuing to have a role in the New World Order, they have no problem throwing it overboard. I think the most paradigmatic case in this regard is what has happened within the Roman Church. From the Catholic Church, with the so-called Synod on Synodality. A very strange thing, this Synod on Synodality, which was launched in 2021, that its last official session was, it's not a coincidence. All the foundations were laid in the year 2024. It was on October 26, 2024, where Pope Francis approved a summary of the Synod on Synodality. Commissions and study groups remain open, and in June 2025, they will present what the Pope will ratify. Synod on Synodality. It will be in June 2025 when they will present what will be ratified by the Pope, which will imply the adaptation of the Roman Church to the context and framework of the New World Order. When they put on the table to be ratified by the Pope, what that will imply precisely, the adaptation of the Roman Church to the context and framework of the New World Order. Churches have historically been characterized by being too human, so to speak, doesn't take away from, it doesn't diminish the value of the internal message it carries. I like to share that churches are indeed like they have very pure water, very clean water. In the case of the Catholic Church, it's nothing less than the pure water of Christ and Christianity, something exalted and something wonderful. Churches act as conduits for water flow, keeping it pure. Let that water flow. And of course, when you put that pure and clean water through the pipes, that pure and clean water continues to flow, and there are still people, of course, in the churches and in the Roman Church that have to do with that pure and clean water. But the pipes indeed also play a significant role. The pipes are the ecclesiastical structures, the powers that are established through those ecclesiastical structures, the networks of vested interest that exist in those ecclesiastical structures, and it's these pipes that want to adapt, precisely to continue having weight and prominence in this regard. Do you know that I lead a research project which is about consciousness and dystopian society? This research project has a group, a community on Telegram, Dystopian Society. This is a community on Telegram where at least once a week, usually on Thursdays, we publish a text that touches on very different topics, that is always related to this backdrop of dystopian society and consciousness. And not long ago, a few weeks ago, in the month of December, an article was published specifically about this, about the Synod of Synodality, as a sample, about how the churches, in this case the Church of Rome, are going through an internal process to adjust, to adapt to the values, in quotes, the values, to the paradigms, to the belief systems of the New World Order. To those who are most interested, I invite you to check out that article published in the Telegram community of Histopic Society, of the research project with Science and Histopic Society. Let's continue. What do you think is the reason why Elon Musk has brought this to light? The issue of abuses in Rotterdam and those allowed by the British government. I'm going back to the thing. Struggles. Among them, fights. Among them, battles. Among them, in order to have the best positions, the best places, the best chairs, and the best sofas when the New World Order is established. These kinds of people have no interest in the common good. We care about a mess. They live and go about their own business. They are focused, their own interests, and they make proclamations that we think have a background of the common good, but that is always a big lie. We're always talking about struggles and fights among them. A backdrop of the common good, but that is always a big lie. We're always talking about struggles and fights among them. Never, let's not forget and not get caught, neither with one mask nor with the other, because the face behind one mask and the other is always the same. B, because the face behind one mask and the other is always the same. What do you think about the groups that want to adhere to natural law to step outside the system? Don't you think it's an ideologized approach that seeks individual benefit, confusing the true meaning of natural law? Of course. First things first, it's an approach, in quotes, ideologized. Therefore, it always contributes to dividing, splitting, and separating. And it also creates a kind of juggling act that really strays from the true meaning of natural law. But we have to be aware that, in addition, it's not possible to step outside the system. The system is there. But we have to be aware that, in addition, it's not possible to step outside the system. The system is there. It's going to be increasingly present, and we're going to have to live with it. We shared it a week ago. Living with the system is definitely going to be unavoidable. Let's not chase after illusions. Let's not be naive. We're going to have to live with the system. Coexistence versus complicity. Coexisting doesn't mean living by the system. We have free will to live differently. That we live in it does not mean that we live as the system wants us to live. We're always going to have free will to live differently. As we shared last week, we're also going to emphasize this in the last part of today's session. The system is going to reach everywhere. We're going to live with it. But whether we are complicit or not, whether we fall into complicity or not, that will depend on each one of us. We've already referred to that free will. We've already mentioned that virtue will always be within our reach, and whether we make it our own or not depends solely on us. So, we now enter the second block of your questions and contributions, which has to do with technology, electromagnetic distortions, and transhumanism. There are 5 questions. So let's move on to the 10th question. This friend here says, you've talked about quantum supremacy, and I wonder if quantum energy, besides serving for these technological advancements, they also produce events that happen, but we don't see them, like Columbus's ships or the indigenous people. They didn't see them until they practically disembarked because they weren't registered in their minds. And does it have any relation to the opening of the heavens? And here this friend quotes from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 51, where it says, and he said to him, truly, I say to you, from now on, you will see the heavens opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Well, when we talk about the quantum, first of all, we shouldn't strictly associate it with a type of energy. Quantum is much more complex. This isn't the time to go into detail, but certainly quantum physics highlights the reality of the small, the reality of the infinitesimal, the reality of particles in their different types, the properties, and the rules and norms that exist in that world. Quantum and subquantum. And talking about energy isn't quite right, because it would only refer to a part of what the quantum actually represents. That's one part. Second, when we talk about the fact that the Native Americans didn't see Columbus's ships until they were practically right on top of them, because since they didn't have it registered in their minds, they couldn't identify it. To put it colloquially, this is what we referred to in the monthly meeting in December, where we talked about the mind with everything that it implies. And this has nothing to do with quantum energy or with the quantum in any of its perspectives. This has to do with the functioning of our mind that those of you who were there in the monthly meeting, you can review it in the text, and in the video, it has to do with the tanmatras, which is what they're called, the tanmatras. It has nothing to do with the quantum in any of its perspectives. And it also has nothing to do with the quantum in any of its perspectives. In my humble understanding, this precious phrase from the Gospel of John 1:51, it has much more to do with the fact that once Christ ascends to the heavens, we have already entered the end of this human cycle, at the end of this generation, which will eventually conclude. That conclusion comes hand in hand with a new humanity in a restored earth, where the presence of the Christ is given. And what is being said to us is that even if we don't see it, it's already here. That is already open, so to speak, that window of the parousia, as it's called in Christian texts, even if it happens on day D and hour H. From the moment of Christ's ascension to the heavens, it's, so to speak, that window has already been opened. It's already been opened, using a more modern term, though perhaps not quite right. The portal is now open through which, at the right moment, the parousia will manifest among us. I think this is what the quote that this friend is referring to. It makes mention. Let's continue. Question number 11. Lately, I've been hearing comments about 15-minute cities where our range of movement would be limited. In Bilbao, where I live, There are numerous roadworks at the same time, mainly affecting car traffic. Could you tell us what you think about this topic? Indeed, it's another manifestation of what we've been insisting on. This system, he's specialized in selling smoke. In other words, we are presented with grand statements of intent. There's a lot of propaganda, a lot of talk about the common good, and it's all a big lie. That has a poisoned candy behind it. It has a trick behind it, and that trick doesn't work in our favor, but rather the opposite. This system of 15-minute cities, a long time ago, not with this name, but it's been talked about for a long time. I remember in my other life, so to speak, about this guy Emilio, when he was a consultant as an international expert for the United Nations. We're talking about the 90s, the early 21st century, about the idea that cities would be in proximity service, where we could have everything. We could have schools, we could have stores, we could have health centers, we could have places to do sport. Proximity service provides all essentials: schools, stores, health centers, sports within 15-minute walk. Schools, we could have stores, we could have health centers, we could have places to do sports. In a radius that wouldn't be more than a 15-minute walk, it was, so to speak, the ideal way to organize cities. Certainly, those who started the mind in this had good intentions. Control and segregation will determine living areas. Control populations, create city borders, increase classism, restrict movement. It's about establishing monitoring, controlling the population, setting up borders within the cities themselves. The New World Order, classism, social division, and social segregation will be immense, because there will not only be economic differences, but also differences in terms of greater or lesser submission to a single thought, to the hybridization of people. Based on that, some will be able to live in one place, while others will be able to live in another. And people will indeed face difficulties in movement. Their movements will be limited precisely based on this certain social segregation. There is series. The series ends poorly, highlighting 15-minute city risks. Forgive me, the producer, the screenwriter, the director, the actors, the ending is very bad. But throughout the series, in the episodes, before the forced, convoluted, overly optimistic ending that it develops, it clearly highlights where this 15-minute city format can lead. The series is precisely called. It clearly emphasizes in detail where this 15-minute city format can lead and potential outcomes. The series is precisely called The Fence, because it's fences that limit people's movements, and those limitations are related to control, to monitoring, etc. That's what I can share in this brief context of this monthly meeting about these 15-minute cities. Indeed, they have nothing to do with the common good. Rather, they are aimed precisely at a system of monitoring, control, and limitation of our movements, etc. Question 12. Do you think that because of this magnetism that surrounds us, we're talking about electromagnetic distortions, humans are suffering mutations in their cells, like the rise in cancer cases in recent years? I cannot say this with certainty, but obviously, being caught in an electromagnetic spider web that is becoming more and more intense, by force, that has to affect our physical body and our vital body. I don't know if it's causing cancer. I can't say, because I don't know, or other things, but just by common sense, living in a electromagnetic web that keeps growing in intensity, and an intensity that we naively welcome because it brings us comfort. Everyone simply wants excellent mobile connections, excellent Wi-Fi connections. How great 5G is, how great what's coming is, which is 6G, everything is so fast, everything, etc. And with all of that, what is being done? All of this is being used to launch. An enormous platform is already being created with these electromagnetic distortions that inevitably affect our physical body and our vital or etheric body. That's why it's so important, when we talk about our way of life, to focus on our own matters while they focus on theirs. It's crucial that we maintain a way of life that is as healthy, harmonious, and balanced as possible, because that's the best antidote against these electromagnetic contaminations that we are mentioning. Against these electromagnetic contaminations that we are mentioning, the 13th question also refers to the electromagnetic web, This friend tells us that the electromagnetic web around the Earth is growing larger, as is its impact on us. In addition to a way of life where we vibrate higher and higher, there are external means that can help us, such as reducing radiation in the home. We're even advised to check out the channel of Joan Carlos Lopez Sancho on YouTube. Likewise, the use of stones that harmonize like chunguita, etc. This friend tells us music to harmonize the home or to harmonize ourselves. The advice comes from the magnificent channel of my great friend, by the way, Jezabel Martinez, with whom at least once a year we have the opportunity to share on her channel about these kinds of things, etc. Can you tell us about other external means or composers, that can help us? As I just pointed out and will elaborate on in the final part of this presentation, the most important thing is our own healthy life, our harmony, and our internal tuning. I would say that balance and internal harmony is the great antidote against all these influences, those from the electromagnetic web and others that also relate to other invasive technologies. And since we're talking about composers and music, I would advocate for classical music, but not just classical music. For me, 111. A strong call for classical music, but not just any kind of classical music, which for me, as a great music lover, any type of classical music is a true beauty, but particularly classical music that has a transcendent sense, that has a spiritual depth to it, and very specifically, besides classical music, certain spiritual compositions, where, for example, I strongly advocate for Cistercian chant, which is not Gregorian chant, exactly because they are sung in Spanish, although they have a connection to Gregorian chants. And this type of music also provides that certain vibration, which acts as an antidote to the distortions or harmful effects of the web we're mentioning. And the 14th question insists on the same thing. How can we protect ourselves from the electromagnetic field that will affect the Earth and therefore all the beings that inhabit it? I think that's all I have to share, and with what we will share later. This question is answered. Let's move on to the third section. There are two questions, 15 and 16, related to extraterrestrials. Regarding extraterrestrials, this friend asks, why reveal them now and not years ago? These people have technology now and are capable of creating holograms, drones, lasers, and using technology to deceive, instill fear, and control. And that we don't discover the real extraterrestrials that are with them. What do you think about that? Are there aliens who can take human form? Another question, is it possible to identify them in some way, for example, by following our intuition? Well, here are some questions related to extraterrestrials that completely escape this monthly meeting, and to address them, we would need to dedicate some time. That would make it impossible for us to respond to the set of questions we have ahead. I remind you that we already dedicated a monthly meeting specifically to extraterrestrials, so you can find the video of the sessions on Kiko's website, the presentation and the response to questions, and the text we used at that time. I don't remember the date on which that monthly meeting on extraterrestrials was held, but I do remember the meeting perfectly. So for all of you who want to have more information about the extraterrestrial world, what it consists of, what it is, the evolutionary extraterrestrial humanoid civilizations, the involutive ones, the implications, influences, or interferences they might have with us, etc., I recommend you check out the material from that monthly meeting. In what exactly concerns us here, we are asked in detail why reveal them now and not years ago. I have the perception that I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I have the perception that the shadow government, which with the world order will no longer be in the shadows, that is, the hands that direct the global socio-economic system, And through the global socioeconomic system, they control and dominate the political institutional framework and the technological and military complex. I am convinced, and I insist, I don't want to convince anyone of anything, but it is my conviction that for quite some time now, one or several involutive extraterrestrial civilizations, meaning those with technological development but without consciousness development, have been in contact with those who run this shadow government. I also believe that for a long time now, there has been a technological transfer, meaning that the shadow government, in exchange for certain things, is receiving specific technological advancements from these humanoid extraterrestrial civilizations, which are then sold to us as if they were results of human invention, when in reality they are related to the technological transfer from these extraterrestrial civilizations. I hold that conviction. So of course they could have presented it earlier, but the thing is, things happen when they are meant to, because by presenting it earlier, they would have been benefiting from these technological transfers. They have done it as they have been doing everything in the shadows. And the possibility, the hypothesis, because we consider it as a hypothesis, that by the year 2030, they might use that card that the elite has up their sleeve to put us in front of the television, so to speak, to understand that civilization, or those extraterrestrial civilizations, that will indeed happen precisely because it will contribute to definitively shaping the new world order. So of course they could have presented it earlier, but the thing is, things happen when they are meant to, because by presenting it earlier, they would have been benefiting from these technological transfers. They have done it as they have been doing everything in the shadows, and the possibility, the hypothesis, because we consider it as a hypothesis, that by the year 2030, they might use that card that the elite has up their sleeve to put us in front of the television, so to speak, to understand that civilization, or those extraterrestrial civilizations, that will indeed happen, precisely because it will contribute to definitively shaping the new world order. That card that the elite has up their sleeve to put us in front of the television to colloquially understand that civilization or those extraterrestrial civilizations. If that happens, it will happen precisely because it will contribute to definitively shaping the new world order. That's precisely why, if it happens, it will happen when that new world order is being built in its final phase, which is precisely what we are in. I won't get tired of repeating, as we stated last week, that by 2024, the foundations will have been completed, and now in 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029, the floors will be built so that by 2030, the building will be completely finished. And it is in the configuration of these structures where the presentation of extraterrestrials, either as a threat or as friends, can be used by the elite, and if it happens, it will clearly be used with the objective of strengthening, helping to build, and consolidating the new world order. Just a week ago, we talked about one of the things that the appearance of an extraterrestrial humanoid civilization could entail, that presenting themselves in quotes as benevolent is a big lie, but we've said this before, they show one face, but the reality is different, and they will be sold to us as if they might cure diseases, help us cure diseases, provide solutions in energy matters, etc. And of course, from there, we will elevate them to an altar. These extraterrestrials will become a kind of demigods, let's say, in the minds of many people. And when asked about their vision of the transcendent, the divine, the supernatural, whatever they say will be accepted by a large number of human beings, which can contribute to confusion, to the fog, to the loss of soul that we've been referring to. And there's also another issue with extraterrestrials. Due to this recent wave of sightings, UFOs, drones, in case some of them are really extraterrestrials, and as you mentioned, when they are revealed, they will surely be involutive. Will the evolutionary extraterrestrial beings help us in any way? That's a great question, as there are interferences, and we will cover it. There are indeed involutive interferences from extraterrestrial beings, but there is also evolutionary support. In fact, in this session, there is a section that we will dedicate to evolutionary supports from the celestial orders, which is very important for us to remember. And friends, yes, indeed, there are very spiritually evolved humanoid extraterrestrial civilizations. As we shared in that monthly meeting dedicated to extraterrestrials, these are civilizations that, having developed spiritually in consciousness, no longer even use material technology. They use consciousness technology, which goes far beyond, exponentially beyond the technological advancements of the material world we inhabit. And these extraterrestrial civilizations, of course they are, They are certainly supporting us. Our planet belongs to a solar system, and the solar system where Earth is located coexists with a family of solar systems. This family of solar systems includes Sirius, Zeta Reticuli, Alpha Centauri, and a number of other solar systems. It's my conviction, but I don't want to convince anyone of anything. I bring it up because I'm convinced of it. There are very evolved humanoid extraterrestrial civilizations with consciousness technology due to their spiritual evolution. And by being part of a family, a systemic cluster, as it's called in astronomy, these civilizations are supporting us and accompanying us. That's right, they don't interfere. Evolving beings never interfere. But they provide very subtle support, especially in maintaining balances. That also applies when we later talk about the evolutionary supports that come from angels and celestial orders. Their support in maintaining balance reinforces our free will, ensured by evolutionary forces. The presence guarantees this balance. Involutive beings may confuse us, but it's part of our maturity. While a threat, it's also an opportunity for consciousness development. Confusion and involutive fog can't affect our free will. They will never allow us to lose our free will. In other words, it's one of the central balances where the evolutionary presence of extraterrestrial humanoids and celestial orders always guarantees that for us. The involutive beings may confuse us. The involutive ones may cloud things, but that is also part of our own conscious maturity because while it is a threat, it is also an opportunity for our development in consciousness, as we've already pointed out. And in that context, the confusion and involutive fog can never, ever affect balances like our free will. That, so to speak, is a barrier, a limit that the evolutionary forces, which are far above the involutive ones, will never allow to be crossed by the involutive forces. We have to keep going. Now we're going to address two issues, number 17 and number 18, which are related to the decrease or not of the world population. The two friends who raised this issue with us, in line with what I presented in the presentation a week ago, have proposed long texts, so I am not going to read them because they are very long paragraphs that would take me a long time. It's available to you in the text that Kiko is going to send you. I don't want to convince anyone, especially on this matter. I ask, we use discernment and common sense. I have no special data to assert. The elite aim to reduce the world population. I don't know the future, but so far, it's not been a goal. I have no source. I use discernment and common sense, as mentioned a week ago. If the New World Order aims to mislead souls, much work has been done and is now accelerating. Why kill people when completing the New World Order? If misleading souls is the goal, removing people makes no sense. Killing people means souls aren't incarnated, which is absurd. This is my argument for reflection, not to convince you. It doesn't add up. Misleading souls isn't logical. If the New World Order aims to mislead souls by confusing and clouding them, then a lot of work has been done for a long time, and now it's being accelerated to build the New World Order. What sense does it make that when they are about to complete the New World Order, they would kill people? If the goal is to mislead souls, and so much effort is being put into constructing the New World Order, it doesn't make sense to remove people from the equation. Because, of course, if people are killed, the souls are not here incarnated, which would simply be absurd. This is the argument I present for your reflection, not to convince you of anything, but for your contemplation. It doesn't add up because the goal is to mislead souls, create the framework to mislead it, and once I've created the framework, I remove it from the equation. So what has all this been for? It makes no sense. They could have removed a large part of the human population a long time ago, because let's not forget, the human population has not only not decreased, it has been increasing. It's true that there have been very significant wars, like the world wars of the 20th century. It's true that there are diseases that cause a lot of death. But let's not forget that the world population has been increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing, and from the perspective of those who dominate the socioeconomic system, nothing has been done to stop it. We have reached the year 2024, and we have already surpassed the barrier of 8 billion human beings compared to the 1.262 billion we were in the year 1900. look at the leap that has happened from 1.260 billion from the round number of the year 1900 to the 8 billion in the year 2024. That's a spectacular demographic increase. And it doesn't seem like the elite is trying to prevent it. On the contrary. Besides that, and with this I conclude, we also need to use our common sense and discernment that there is balance, as I mentioned before, where the involutive forces, even if they wanted to, even if they went crazy and wanted to do something, there are balances they cannot touch because the evolutionary forces would prevent it. Well, one of those balances has to do with the fact that as we approach the end of this human cycle and the beginning of the new human cycle, what corresponds is that the souls we have been incarnating during reincarnations in our life chain for centuries and centuries and centuries, now that we are reaching the moment of transition, which will happen when the time is right, but the signs of the times tell us that it doesn't seem to be very far off. So, as we get closer, the souls we have been incarnating in this entire chain, which have been rotating, now some of us go, now others go. As we approach that definitive moment, the vast majority of us will have to be incarnated. I wouldn't dare to say all of us. But yes, the vast majority incarnated, which is the deep reason for the demographic increase we've experienced since 1900. But I insist, as a fundamental argument, it makes no sense that if their goal is to mislead souls, and they are going to great length to confuse souls, as they build this structure for the near future, removing souls would be doing them a favor, and they would be throwing stones at their own roof since they want to mislead souls. From there, read the reasoning that these two friends present to us. To the souls in the middle, they would do the souls a favor, so to speak, and they would throw stones at their roof because they want to lead souls astray. From there, read the reasoning that these two friends give us. In the text, I absolutely and wholeheartedly respect them, but I can't help but share what I genuinely believe is something we need to weigh with our discernment and common sense. And sincerely, the argumentation I just recalled and that I already presented in the session of this monthly meeting, we continue to move forward. Let's go to other involutive interferences. At what point do we know that circumstances are invading our being? In other words, when do we know that we are being invaded by circumstances that are adverse compared to saying in the living being, and I am aware? We mentioned this in the monthly meeting where, among other things, we talked about angels and demons, and going into detail about this completely takes us out of the context of this monthly meeting. There is a way, which is what all the wise men and women have always taught us, when we can perceive that there is some kind, let's call it that, of direct involutive interference within us. There is an invasion, a harassment towards us. The best way is prayer, praying, and observing our reactions during prayer, and harassment towards us in particular. The best way is prayer, praying, and seeing how we react when we engage in a prayer. Let's take, for example, it doesn't have to be this one, but let's take the Christian Our Father. Pray the Christian Our Father to start praying and see what happens within us. If when praying the Our Father, which is also very brief, we don't notice anything particular within ourselves, we can rule out any kind of invasion or direct affectation. If we see restlessness or anger, it could indicate direct interference. A restlessness, anger while reciting Our Father, facing such interference. If we don't, that's great. That could be a clue that we are experiencing a direct interference of the kind posed in this question. And when we perceive that we don't have it, well, that's great. And when we realize that we have it, well, that's a spur not to fall into fear, but to emphasize a way of life that is consistent with who we are. If we perceive that there is some kind of interference of this nature within us, what we need to do is that we persevere more and have more willpower, precisely to carry out a way of life that values the values of our soul, that values the presence of who we are. In that sense, I would also advise seeking support from some people you can trust, who are conscious individuals, who can share with you and lend a hand when it comes to having external support to overcome this type of interference. Another issue, I think these involutive people, I think they must be aware of the serious karma they are creating and continue to create Don't they care? And do they know that they are going to die? Where do these souls go when they disincarnate? The transition to a new humanity involves two timelines, one to a higher frequency Earth, another to a dense underworld. Involutive beings aim to lead and be revered in this underworld. When we say that their goal is to mislead souls so that the smallest possible number of people, of souls, participate in the new humanity, we're talking about two timelines opening up, meaning that at the moment the parousia occurs, when this human cycle ends and the new human cycle begins, two timelines will open up. From the perspective that there will be souls, people, who will live, let's include ourselves, hopefully that will be the case, in the new humanity, in a restored earth, with a higher vibrational frequency, and there will also be another timeline where those who do not live in that new humanity will live in another reality known as Tartarus or the underworld. It's a very dense reality with a very low vibrational frequency. The involutive beings who are directing all of this have already made their choice. They know this better than any of us. They have already chosen to live precisely in that context of the underworld, and in that underworld, they want to take the lead, to be the ones who dominate that underworld, to even receive reverence and worship in that underworld, because the great desire of the major involutive powers is to be like God, to be revered and worshipped like God. All of this is what they hope to achieve in that underworld, which will indeed be a very harsh and dense underworld, and it will be chosen by the souls in the sense that if you do not choose the option of the new humanity in the restored earth, you are choosing the other one. You are exercising your free will to choose one line or the other. Harsh, dense, and it will be chosen by the souls, because if you do not choose new humanity on restored earth, you are choosing the other one. For those directing this system, karma doesn't matter because they accepted non-participation. Karma matters for us wanting new humanity, but for those choosing the involutive timeline, underworld, these arguments are worthless, or they might matter if you completely change the situation as it's viewed differently. They don't care because they have already accepted that they will not participate. Karma is important for those of us who want to live in the new humanity, but for those who have no desires, for those who have already decided that their timeline moving forward is the involutive one, the one of the underworld, all these kinds of arguments, friends, are worthless. Or they might be worth something, but only if you completely turn the situation around, because it is viewed in a radically different way. Question 21. When he talks about climate change, why doesn't he mention something known by independent scientists, not bought by the system, that human participation in the increase of CO2, which they base that change on, is not even 1%? Why doesn't he also mention the numerous hygiene interventions that are causing much more harm? Every day for years, I see the skies not only with chemical trails, but also with irradiated clouds in the form of wavy streaks. And many more things that are happening. There are hundreds of patents for climate modification. Well, obviously, for this friend, this monthly meeting is not about climate change. Getting into CO2, getting into H3, or these chemicals, getting into geoengineering is completely outside the scope of this monthly meeting. We have dedicated a monthly meeting focused solely on climate change, where all this information was shared. In fact, I am a co-author of a book titled Climate Change, A Conscious Approach, published by Ediciones Adalid, and both in that monthly meeting and in this text, of course, all of this is part of climate change. In fact, in the book I just mentioned, there is an entire chapter dedicated to engineering, how it interferes through engineering, by those who dominate the system, altering the climatic conditions. All of this, of course, is true. And therefore, the only reason we haven't gone into detail is simply because it completely falls outside the framework of this meeting. However, I can't resist commenting on the following. Watch out for the topic of CO2 or other things, because, of course, CO2 is necessary for life. The problem is the proportion, that's the issue. And a small change in the proportion can cause drastic alterations in our vital habitat. Look at ourselves. People get tests, blood tests, urine tests, and when people have blood tests or urine tests, they find many things. Those things per se are neither good nor bad, they just exist. Just like CO2, it is precisely part of life on the planet and contributes to life on the planet. The problem arises when the analysis tells you that you've gone outside the normal range and that there's an excess of something in you or a deficiency of something in you. And that can potentially cause a disease in the human body. So the crux of the matter is not whether there is CO2 or not. CO2 is absolutely necessary for life. But be careful, because a small alteration of components, like what happens in tests, which are necessary and beneficial for life, can negatively affect life itself. As for everything else, I insist, in that text I just shared or in the monthly meeting, you have an abundance of information, not to mention that later on, it won't be this course, but maybe in the next course, 2025, 2026, we will dedicate ourselves again within all that. It's the context of what we're experiencing, a new monographic or quasi-monographic meeting on climate change. Thank you very much in any case for the contribution. There are now 4 questions regarding the triumph of the beast. The triumph of the beast is related to the configuration of the New World Order. In other words, we're talking about the construction of the buildings plans that around 2030 will lead to the beginning, the start of the New World Order. Well, once the New World Order has kicked off, not before, and we don't know exactly when, but certainly once the New World Order becomes a reality, this scenario will occur that Christian texts refer to as the triumph of the beast, and there are 4 questions that you have raised about it. A friend tells us in your notebook, the mark of the beast and the present moment of humanity speaks of 2 beasts. The first one comes out of the sea, and most of the exegetes of the apocalypse agree in identifying the beast from the sea with a political antichrist, and a second beast that comes out of the earth as a sort of delegate or representative of the first. Why does one come out of the sea and the other comes out of the earth? What does this mean? Could you elaborate a bit on these 2 beasts? First of all, this is not a topic that I say in previous meetings or writings, like the essay cited in the Academy's notebooks. We echo Christian teachings. Specifically, regarding the apocalypse in the book of Revelations, it describes a time when 2 beasts emerge, one from the sea and one from the earth. This symbolism is secondary to our current discussion. Importantly, the first beast with a political profile holds command. And very specifically to answer this question, in the book of Revelations or in the apocalypse, it tells us that in the context of that moment, when the beast, iniquity, triumphs in the world in an absolute way, there will curiously be 2 beasts, the one that comes out of the sea and the one that comes out of the earth. It's a symbolism and an allegory that we can't delve into at this moment. In any case, it's secondary to the contents we're discussing here. But it is very important to remember well in the formulation of the question that the first beast, which is the one that has the command, so to speak, that first figure who has the command has a more political profile, using that term in quotes for us to understand. And the second beast acts as a delegate of the first and has a more spiritual profile. It's as if one is more focused on the dominance, the management, the control of the world government, and has a sort of companion that acts as its delegate, who is more concerned with the impact on everything related. And the second beast acts as a delegate of the first and has a more spiritual profile. It's as if one is more focused on the dominance, the management, the control of the world government, and has a sort of companion that acts as its delegate, who is more concerned with the impact on everything related, with the implementation of transhumanist ideology, an involutive spirituality, a spirituality, we can say, even though it may seem like a contradiction, unconscious. This is the meaning of these 2 beasts. They are at the service of the same thing. They are working for the same purpose, but they have a sort of division of labor with these 2 political spiritual profiles that are well captured, I believe, when one reads the text of the Apocalypse. Could you explain and give your point of view on the following hypothesis? From here, there is a person who develops for us a series of contents about the teachings, the contributions of Rudolf Skene. It's long, it's a lengthy paragraph, and I can't go into reading it because it would take us too much time. What I do take from what this person This friend is indeed letting us know that Rudolf Steiner mentioned that when the triumph of the beast takes place, it would be in a context where the Luciferian aspect within the involutive takes a back seat and the spotlight is on the Ahrimanic. Steiner even talks about that Antichrist we are referring to. From metaphysics, it is Ahriman. Ahriman and Ahrimanic is the cold. Ahriman and Ahriman, and the Ahrimanic means the cold. We could express in a way the virtual, the artificial, the suspicion, the detachment, the distancing between human beings and nature in our world. All of this is the cooling of the human spirit in the face of the Luciferic or Luciferian dynamic that has been the main player until now. That is hot, the stirring of emotions, the blood sacrifices, the violence in the configuration of the New World Order. The hot is losing prominence. It is not that it disappears, but it passes into the background. And what takes all the prominence is a dynamic, a cooling strategy with the figure of Ahriman that has to do with the Antichrist as a central element. I agree. Personally, these are the comments that this friend makes against this background and with which I agree. Me personally, I've studied it, I've meditated on it, and I've also compared with other traditions. I believe Steiner hits the mark when he discusses the shift from the hot to the cold, from the Luciferic to the Ahrimanic, and he explains that triumph of the beast with this Ahrimanic figure that relates to the two beasts. Another friend asks, do you think the Antichrist is already incarnated? That triumph of the beast with this Ahrimanic figure that relates to the two beasts, primarily with the first of the two that I shared earlier. Another friend asks, according to your feeling, is the Antichrist already incarnated? I don't dare to answer this question because I might create a lot of confusion among you and myself. The reality is that I don't know. I can't be sure. That everything is very accelerated, that we are moving too fast in everything, and that acceleration and moving so fast in everything makes me think that yes, the Antichrist has indeed already incarnated and is among us, so to speak, even though he hasn't taken control yet. To put it directly, running, yes, but I can't be sure, friends. That's why I said that I think in a certain way, but I sense in a way that yes, the Antichrist has already been born. He is already here incarnated, definitely, even though he clearly hasn't taken control yet, as it is expected, because that will only happen once it has been configured, once it becomes a reality. The New World Order, looking at the events, this puts an end to the questions regarding the triumph of the beast. Considering the events in the United States, the new president, one might consider as a hypothesis that one of them could be the Antichrist. The Bible says that one of them will come from the sea. Although it sounds like a science fiction movie, it's possible that they have the Antichrist behind the scenes, a hybrid, half human, half those who will present him as a savior to humanity. I can't rule it out, but I can't affirm it either. It's something similar to what I shared earlier. I don't have certainty that this is the case under any circumstances. Therefore, I can't provide any specific information regarding this matter, although, of course, as a hypothesis, what this friend proposes should be taken into account. We are entering the section on the transition to the new humanity. In the presentation, they talked about the new humanity. It's something close and emerging. However, the cycles of races and their races establish periods of several thousand years for these structural change events. What determining factor makes us think and conclude that we are already at the end of this cycle and that regardless of the circumstances, we might still be far from such a significant phenomenon as the end of times? In the Christian tradition, which is the one that speaks the most about this, the end of times is a term that is linked to the end of this human cycle. Jesus Christ in chapter 24 of the Gospel of Matthew is very clear. I'm not going to talk about the end of the earth, nor the end of life, nor the end of humanity. Let's talk about the end of times. Let's talk about the end of times of this human cycle, of this human generation. And what I share with you, it is drawn from comparisons with different spiritual traditions, fundamentally focusing on the teachings of Christ Jesus and the teachings we find in the New Testament about these kinds of things. And indeed, humanities last a long time. It's also true that traditions teach us that each humanity lasts less than the previous one, the next one lasts less than the one before. It's as if the process, the dynamic of evolution from humanity to humanity is speeding up. And what is also indicated to us is that the end of this human cycle will be, for the moment, will be suddenly. This is very important. It's not that he's coming soon. It's not about whether he comes soon or late. No, that's not it. It will be when it's time. What will happen is that it will be suddenly. When the time comes, it will be suddenly. There's an expression, I can't remember, forgive me, in which text of the New Testament, but what stuck with me when I studied it is that it talks about iniquity, about the involutive, about evil, about the people who are embodying that iniquity. It clearly says they are here now, and then they are not. They are here now, and then they are not. And when we read about the parousia, about the separation, it tells us that two people will be in the field. One will cease to be, and the other will still be. Two women will be on the rooftop. One will be there, and the other will cease to be. That is to say, it is clearly stated that it will be suddenly. That doesn't mean it will be soon, but when it happens, it will be suddenly. Question 27. We haven't even reached the halfway point of the 63. I'm going to have to lighten things up a bit. Everything seems to indicate that the end of this humanity is closer than we thought. They would be the 2030 agenda and the restoration of the New World Order. The beginning of this historical event, we're talking about 5-10 years, we're very close. The signs of the times tell us that everything is accelerating without any doubt. I believe we can clearly state that the year 2030 is the year of the proclamation. As we shared a week ago, the proclamation of peace and security, the manifestation of the New World Order, but we don't know the time frame between that and the triumph of the beast. And we don't know it, so I believe that what we need to do is stay alert to the signs of the times. That's why the importance of these kinds of meetings. We're not here to instill fear, quite the opposite. It's to instill confidence. It's to empower us in who we are and to understand the moment we are living in. I believe that at this moment we can affirm that the foundations of the building are being constructed of the New World Order to become a reality in 2030. We will see over the next few years if this gets confirmed, and from there we will consider at the right moment what the distance might be between that year 2030, the configuration of the New World Order, and the triumph of the beast, which could be, I repeat, something quick or something that has a significant time gap. And certainly that suddenly we were talking about that parousia. Jesus Christ tells us to forget about the calendars because no one knows the day or the hour, among other things, because as we've also shared in these monthly meetings, when we talk about nothing less than the end of a cycle, the beginning of a new human cycle, etc., we are talking about spiritual times. They called it kairos, the Greeks. We're not talking about material time or chronological chronos, as the Greeks talked about. And spiritual time cannot be measured with a stopwatch or a calendar. Another question is, if there's nothing that can prevent all this nonsense, and while the scriptures have already hinted at it, can humanity evolve while also involuting in another way? Could something happen, I don't know from what dimension, that could prevent it? Let's see, or allow me to pause here, to present you with the following reflection. Avoid what? What are we trying to avoid? That this human cycle ends so that a new human cycle can begin where we have the presence of the new humanity. Does any of you want to avoid this? This is what our souls have been longing for many incarnations. We need to be confident. With compassion, I will say it again later when we talk about the practice of life, with compassion in the face of so much suffering, but at the same time with an inner joy. I don't want to prevent this human cycle from ending under any circumstances. I don't want to prevent this birth where our hearts beat and souls shine. Will lead to the birth of that new humanity in which my heart already beats and my soul shines, and also yours too. Please, let's not avoid this at all. It's what we've been longing for. It's part of our soul's evolutionary process. And we have to be aware that just like childbirth for the birth of something new, there are contractions and upheavals during the process. It's part of it. All this dystopia, all these circumstances are part of the process. We have to understand it, we have to comprehend it, we have to integrate it, not with fear, but with discernment, with common sense and confidence, as I said before, and being joyful. Hey, the power to perceive that the emergence of a new exemplary humanity is not far on the horizon, where we can truly live in coherence with our soul qualities, in connection with all forms of life, and in harmony with nature and Mother Earth, etc., etc. That's what we want to avoid. I ask you, in light of what this friend is raising, let's reflect on this, please. Once you say that the Bible talks about false signs in the sky, are we facing this year, or are we already experiencing it? Basically, those false signs in the sky will be generated by the second beast. Basically, that delegate of the first beast, which is political in nature, the second beast, which is quote-unquote spiritual, will be equipped to use phenomenology to confuse people and to take evolutionary spirituality to the involutive. This is mentioned in the text indeed, but especially in that historical context. Question 31. Could factors that ultimately lead to human pain, such as transhumanism, impersonal digitalization, the increase in social inequalities, and everything that is coming from today until 2030, perhaps be agents of change for humanity to discover its true and divine transcendent nature through this dystopian path? Indeed, I really appreciate this friend for summarizing very well what I've expressed in more words. I've expressed several times in this session and in the previous one that we shouldn't see this as a threat. We are in a process that is wonderful because it's the prelude to the emergence of the new humanity. It's a birthing process, which means that the dystopian upheavals and contractions are inevitable. From there, we need to be aware that these dystopian circumstances are an opportunity for us to become conscious of who we are, to discern what it means to live one way versus another, so we don't fall into complicity, even if we have to coexist, etc., etc. This is question 31 from the text that you will receive tomorrow, and it summarizes it quite well. Next, the cosmic waves that are arriving on Earth. Could unknown origin waves cause a global collapse and be the beginning of the new humanity? No. The beginning of the new humanity is not going to be due to cosmic waves. It may indeed be that these cosmic waves are preparing the Earth for that evolutionary step it needs to take towards a higher vibrational state to become a restored Earth. But the phenomenon of the beginning of the new humanity is more complex, and it has to do with the parousia that is talked about in Christianity. Question 33. Could you give us more clues about this cosmic event? Could it coincide with the great warning of the Garabandal prophecies? And what is your opinion on those Marian apparitions? This is something that completely escapes this friend. It is entirely outside the scope of this monthly meeting. I have no problem, very briefly, but it's such an important topic and of great significance. We already referred to it in the monthly meeting in September, don't forget, where we talked about angels, demons, evolutionary beings, and involutionary beings. There we had a specific heading in response to questions dedicated to the Marian apparitions, and I have no doubt that the Marian soul, that the soul of Mary, that Mary, the mother of Jesus, from the perspective of her spiritual presence, from the soul perspective of Jesus, from the perspective of her spiritual presence, from the soul perspective, she is playing a very important role in supporting all of us in the current moment. I have no doubt. I sense that her mantle of love, that her mantle of protection is accompanying us. It has to do with the evolutionary support that we have mentioned and to which we will return now. I have no doubt at all. And in that sense, I have no doubt about the truth of certain Marian apparitions. Of course, from all of them, I don't have knowledge of all the Marian apparitions. I know there have been more than 10,000, and in detail, I know very few. But since one is mentioned, which is the one from Garabandal, I have the perception of certainty of the truth of the Marian apparition at Garabandal. You mentioned the issue of solar flares or storms that the Earth is experiencing and how they could affect technology or electricity. There is a prophecy that says the earth will experience 3 days of darkness at some point. Do you know anything about this topic? If that's the case, could you share it with us? Well, there are certain prophecies, it appears precisely in one of the Marian apparitions, which tell us that when the time comes, but this will be in the final stretch, when we are already reaching the moment of transition, when the transition to the new humanity becomes a reality, we will experience a situation that is described, I believe, more symbolically than in a real and physical way, of 3 days of darkness. That has to do with global events we will face, and it will also serve as a warning for those who might be in doubt about what to do with their lives. It will act as a spur, an awakening to awaken our consciences so we can fully experience the new humanity. About what to do with their lives, in that free will, whether to choose or not to choose virtue, it will be like a kind of spur, a kind of awakening so that our consciences become more alive and we can ultimately be more of what we can experience in that new humanity. It will not be an event aimed at instilling fear, but rather an event aimed at awakening consciousness. When the new humanity comes, if we have already passed away, will we reincarnate in it? Or on the contrary, will only those who are living on Earth at that moment of vibrational change of Mother Earth be in it? No, there will be incarnated souls will experience the parousia, while some souls not incarnated will directly incarnate from the plane of light into the new humanity. It's possible, though not certain, that souls who won't return may pass away directly incarnating in the new humanity. They won't return because of their life purpose and reincarnation cycle. We shouldn't rule out that some souls may not return to incarnate in this humanity. They might directly incarnate in the new humanity because of their spiritual growth. These souls will not return here. Some will incarnate here, others will join the new humanity or underworld based on their choice. And they will directly incarnate in the new humanity because they have already achieved a sufficient level of spiritual development, and for whatever reason, in their life purpose and in their cycle of reincarnations, they will not return to incarnate in this humanity. And indeed, therefore, there will be souls incarnated here and souls that will be in the plane of light and will join the new humanity or to the underworld in case their soul's choice has been precisely towards unconsciousness, towards density, etc. Regarding the individualized souls that will not make the cut to the new humanity, what about them? Towards unconsciousness, towards density, etc. Regarding the individualized souls that will not make the cut to the new humanity, what will happen to them? In what realm or dimension will these souls continue their evolution? I've already mentioned it in that underworld, which is also referred to as Tartarus in spiritual texts. Is all of this going to happen before the earth raises its vibrational frequency? What will happen to those spirit souls that pass on? We've already answered that, and it has to do with the moment of the earth's vibrational frequency elevation. And the last question in this section about the new humanity, question 38. Those who die in these last dystopian times and haven't even filled their lamp with a drop, can they be reborn in life after passing away? In other words, will they make changes or awaken in the heavens and continue their conscious and spiritual journey in the sky? Or do they remain in the bardos, suffering for not being born in this life, in this incarnation, and not entering the restored earth to be part of the new humanity? Evolution in consciousness happens here in the human experience. There are other things, there are other experiences and encounters. We'll see it in the monthly meeting, I think in June, where we're going to talk about life after death, the plane of light, contact with the disembodied, all of that we'll cover there. But with magnificent things and experiences in the plane of light, soul and consciousness evolve in matter. Soul's presence doesn't matter, they choose their path. It doesn't happen outside of matter. It doesn't happen disembodied. It happens while incarnated. And from there, what we've shared, the fact that souls are or aren't here at the moment of the transition to the new humanity doesn't mean anything. They will join the new humanity or the underworld, depending on the soul's choice they have made. There are now 5 questions regarding evolutionary supports. There's a friend who tells us, reviewing the description you have shared about the 2030 agenda and its objectives, I'm prompted to ask you about the existence of evolutionary planes or realms that are monitoring this process, and whether, beyond the free will of each soul incarnated on Mother Earth, there are established limits of action in the universal order regarding the levels or extents of manipulation and control. I was talking about that friend who summarized very well that we should see these moments not as a threat, but as an opportunity for consciousness. This friend has captured everything we've been sharing here about the existence of those evolutionary planes that are supporting us and maintaining the balances. I believe that this expression best helps us understand the role they play. They don't interfere, they don't act like the involutive forces, but they do ensure that the balances are maintained. In this context of those evolutionary planes, we must obviously include the celestial orders, as they are called in sacred texts, especially among those celestial orders, the ones that are closest to us, the archangels, and even closer to us, the angels. And without forgetting the possible support we mentioned earlier from extraterrestrial humanities, evolutionary humanoid civilizations. Question 40. Sometimes we know what we need to change, but it's hard to break free from inertia and let go of fear. Do you think it helps to ask for help from angels and beings of light in the process of being reborn? Of course, dear friends, it's a beauty. I appreciate this reflection, and I'm very grateful to this friend for bringing it up. It's enough already with the fear. This is a precious moment. Our souls have been waiting a long time for us to reach the end of this human cycle. Well, let's take advantage of these dystopian circumstances as a spur for our awareness, for our evolution. Let's cultivate compassion, especially for all the people who are suffering so much. In the face of the kingdoms of nature, and in that context, let's trust and even ask for help from those evolutionary beings. And we can't forget, we talked in the monthly meeting in September about angels, that there are angels who watch over us. We all have a guardian angel watching over us. We don't have a guardian angel. It's not that Emilio has a guardian angel. That's very egotistical. There is an angel that watches over Emilio. It also possibly watches over other souls incarnated in other people. It watches over the soul that is incarnated in me and watches over the soul that is incarnated in other people. But the truth is that each of us has a guardian angel watching over us, even if that angel watches over other people. Of course, that we need to reach out to that guardian angel. This already seems ridiculous because this society that has killed God, this dystopian society, this society where the involutive is gaining presence, has turned something with a very important background into a joke and a comedy. I remember perfectly that when I was a child, the prayer we said to the guardian angel was, "Guardian angel, sweet company, don't leave me alone, neither at night nor during the day. Guardian angel, pray to God for me." Well, beyond just reciting this like it's often done in dogmatized religion like a parrot, let's focus on the fact that we have an angel who is with us. We have angels. The forms of life in nature have beings that support them. Let's go. Let's reach out to them. Let's turn to Mary, the one I mentioned earlier, the figure of a mother who acts as a mother with her protective mantle. Let's go. Let's talk to them. Let's reach out to them. But please, not to bring up egotistical things, material topics like passing an exam or getting money to pay the mortgage. Please, no. 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 Let's not be foolish. Let's take those kinds of things seriously and focus on serious matters that have to do with consciousness, with being reborn, with living more and more in coherence with who we are. We'll insist on that again. We have their help, and I would say we should, not just that we can, but that we should reach out to them daily for their support. And I confess to you that I do it every day, many times throughout the day, by the way. We continue with everything we are experiencing and what is coming in this 5-year period. How are the angels and archangels helping us to keep moving forward and building our new humanity so that we can transcend this period successfully? I think this question has already been answered, but I encourage you to check out the material from the monthly meeting last September, from September 24, because we covered all of this in great detail. Question 42. Does Archangel Michael have an important role in the help that is being provided to us during these times by divine grace? As we shared in the monthly meeting in September, the angels perform a role of messaging, of delivering messages. Angels guard us personally. Archangels handle global issues, setting limits against involutive forces. Archangel Michael is key in this protection. The archangels provide a global protection, meaning that the major balances and significant issues are in the hands of the archangels. They set the limits so that the involutive forces cannot break those balances. Within the archangels, traditions particularly highlight the significant role of Archangel Michael, who, so to speak, clearly establishes that boundary against the involutive forces that they will never, ever be able to cross, no matter how much they might want to. I once heard you say that the earth is being cared for by beings of light who live in the Father Son. Is it possible that a solar storm that goes against the elite's agenda could be part of the Earth's vibrational expansion? There are traditions that indeed speak of the existence of very evolved forms of life in the context of the sun, in the context of the solar star. They are the solar beings. Life on the sun seems unbelievable, yet traditions confirm it. The sun, our system's ruler, aids evolution. Solar storms might limit the electromagnetic web if it manipulates us, threatening free will. A major storm could significantly disrupt this web. The sun is the ruler of the planetary system. They support us. And solar storms may confront the involutive ones. This is as far as we've come, especially about that electromagnetic web. If the electromagnetic web confuses and clouds, but also distorts our minds and hinders evolution against free will. For the evolutionary forces, a great solar storm could disrupt much of that web. In fact, a year and a half ago, around February 23, there was already a solar radiation that, to say, this is as far as we've come, especially in relation to that electromagnetic web. If the electromagnetic web not only confuses and clouds, but also wants to manipulate us in some way to distort our minds and hinder our evolutionary process, that would mean going against free will. It would mean crossing a boundary. And from the perspective of the evolutionary forces, a great solar storm could disrupt a part, if not all, at least a very significant part of that web. 18 months ago, in February of 23, solar radiation affected many satellites launched. This could happen again. It affected a significant number of the satellites that had been launched up to that point. And we shouldn't rule out the possibility that this could happen again. Now, we are entering the second to last section. They with their own matters and us with ours. There are no more and no less than 19 questions. But it's also true that many of these 19 questions or contributions we have already had the opportunity to address in the context of this session. Let's move on to 44. Regarding being born again, what could the expression of Jesus in John 17:26 mean? And I have made your name known to them, and I will continue to make it known, so that the love with which you have loved me may be in them, and I in them. These are phrases of Christ, speaking about God. Phrases of the Son speaking was about his Father. The Son, Christ, has made the name of God known to us. The name of God is the true dimension of divinity. And let's not forget the great characteristic that we are taught in the New Testament is the dimension of love. The God who is love, God is love, and whoever does not know love does not know God. Christ's teachings focus on divine love, unity with the Father, and understanding divinity. You have loved me, may be with them, and I in them. These are the teachings of Christ Jesus, especially and fundamentally regarding this section, directly related to the Father, directly related to the divinity, so that we have a clear understanding of the true essence of the divine. God, the divinity, however we want to call it, has nothing to do with punishments. It has nothing to do with persecutions. It has nothing to do with taking sides for one or the other. God is love. God is love, and that is the great message, without any doubt, that lies in the background of this verse from the Gospel of John, where we also find this precious phrase that God is love, and whoever does not know love does not know God. In light of the outlook that awaits us for the next 5 years, and understanding that we can't be outside of this system and that the invitation is to connivance, what can we do in our day-to-day lives, in our everyday routine? Be good people. Be our best. Live it every moment, every situation, every person. And being good people, you know that I insist a lot on that, because that is not something, it is not a chimera, it is a reality in our daily life, and it is something that we have to live from moment to moment. Being good people now, facing facts, situations, or people. An inner voice exists. We can't deny it. We might look away or deceive ourselves, but we know when we are or aren't being good people. And there's an inner voice, and no one can deny that. We can look the other way, we can try to deceive ourselves, but we all know perfectly well in our daily situations when we are or aren't being good people. Let's be good people. And of course, let's maintain a transcendent view of life that doesn't deceive us. The human being is not only our small physical, emotional, and mental self and the associated personality, but we also have a spiritual dimension. This is what constitutes our true being. Let's not be deceived about it. May the memory of who we are always be present, and may that presence manifest in being our best version, in being good people, in realizing that this world is not ours, and therefore not falling into connivance with this world. Instead, we should live in coherence with what we truly are, and that's how we can summarize it. Living away from our essence leads to aggressive and selfish behavior. Another person asks us, how can we face the challenge of living with people who are far from the peace of the soul? With compassion, please. With the people you see who are more distant, who disregard all this kind of stuff, they despise and belittle it, far from the transcendent and spiritual. Don't let anger, rage, or frustration take over of the transcendent, of their spiritual dimension, of a way of life that is at least minimally coherent with what we truly are. In front of those people, don't let anger take over, don't let rage take over, don't let frustration take over, not even the attempt to convince them. Compassion, let compassion come from you, and compassion is founded on love. And this is the great help we can offer to all these people, a compassionate love, or a compassion based on love. Sometimes my imagination runs wild, and I get terrible thoughts about what could happen or what could be done to us. These thoughts make me feel scared, and then I think that in this state, it's easier for me to get lost, which increases my fear and anxiety. What can I do to feel calm and above all to trust? How can I prepare and protect myself for what I'm going to experience? Look at yourself. Look at yourself. Look at yourself. I'm not talking about your physical body in the mirror. Sit down for a moment, be silent, and look within yourself. You have all the power of your divinity right there. You have all the power of your true self. There is nothing to be afraid of. In fact, they can't do anything to us. They won't go if there were to be an onslaught. Even if it were to be violent concerning our lives, I'm not saying it will be like that, but in the hypothetical case that it were, it actually won't take anything away from us. On the contrary, it will open the door to a new humanity. The fact that by living with awareness and coherence we are willing to face the circumstances that arise makes our oil lamp, our level of consciousness, increase spectacularly. But fundamentally, we have to seek that tranquility within ourselves in the encounter with who we are. And also, of course, as we mentioned before, in the support of evolving spiritual beings. I also advise you this, my friend, what we mentioned earlier. Talk to your guardian angel, or perhaps talk to Mary, or maybe even talk to spiritual figures that you can somehow trust to help you have that trust, so they can help you find that tranquility, and they will give it to you. Don't have any doubt about it. I've said it from the soul, from the heart, said with love. They will provide it for you, dear friend. Don't have any doubt. The way you approach the issue makes it very difficult for us simple souls with good intentions to get out of all this. The truth is, I see it complicated to pass the test well. We are not just simple souls. Souls are the vehicle for the incarnation of the Spirit, and the Spirit carries within it the divine essence. We are not just simple souls. Please, let's not underestimate ourselves. That's what they want. They want to sell us the idea that we are simply subhuman. We have nothing transcendent, and we are simply physical and material. And in the New Age, there's a lot of talk about the soul, but of course, what is the little soul going to do? The soul has at its center the vehicle of something that has that soul at its core, as St. John of the Cross says. The Spirit expresses it beautifully in his poem, Love lives in the soul, and at its center is the Spirit, and in the Spirit is the divine essence that he speaks of. No, we are not victims here. We are not poor people. We have the divine essence. Take advantage of these moments to bring this to the surface. Let these challenges be the chance to remember and present it, not to forget it, not to fall into fear and defeatism, but to put it on the table with courage, with strength, with bravery, because we have a divine essence and because we are already reaching the end of a process that our souls have been waiting for a long time. We have to live this with strength, with courage, being who we are, with joy, with love, and with compassion. Not to forget or fall into fear as they want, but to face it with courage and strength because we have a divine essence and are nearing the end of a long-awaited process. We must live this with strength, courage, joy, love, and compassion. If we are headed towards using digital money and the chip, the mark of the beast, it seems there's no salvation if it becomes mandatory. I think especially about the children born into this world. They are preparing, embodying the presence of who we truly are, with joy, with a lot of love, and with a lot of compassion. If we are inevitably headed towards using, for example, digital money, and later on the famous chip, the mark of the beast, because apparently it won't be possible to move around this world if they make it mandatory at birth and things like that, it seems like there's no possible salvation. I especially think about the children who are going to be born into this world, that they are preparing. What hope can we have in the face of this? Let's see. We've always said it at the beginning, in the middle, and now at the end of this session, we will always have free. We will always have the presence of what we are, which is indeed nothing less than of divine nature. We will always have the support of the forces and the evolutionary beings. They maintain the balances, and in the celestial orders, mainly the angels and also Mary, they are there supporting us in a very direct way. With all that baggage, we will always have free will. They will want to impose the mark of the beast, but they won't be able to impose it on those who don't want to take it. The sacred texts make that very clear, because there will always be free will. And regarding children, and regarding young people, there's another question now, related to young people. Let's see. Neither children are just children, nor are young people just young. The cars, the physical, emotional, and mental self, and the personality associated with it, can be a child, a young person, an adult, or an elderly person. But what matters, especially when we are talking about these things, dear friends, is the driver. It's that these children are spiritual soul dimensions incarnated. And those souls, with the Spirit at their center, haven't incarnated now by chance. They know exactly where they have incarnated, and it has to do with their life purpose and their evolutionary purpose. Let's not doubt it, and let's trust. From the plane of light, a spiritual soul dimension is now incarnating or has just incarnated and is currently a child in physical form. They know perfectly well in what context they are going to incarnate. They know exactly what they will have in their environment. And if they have chosen it this way because they cannot be forced to incarnate, it means that this context, no matter how strange it may seem to us, helps them in their evolutionary process. Please trust in this, and let's never forget it. Children are children in a car, young people are young in a car. In spirit, they can be, quote unquote, much older than you or me, because they have an evolutionary and conscious journey. Of oil in the lamp, which has gone much further. Please always keep this in mind. The children who are going to be born, the children who are being born or are about to be born, are souls, spiritual soul dimensions. They know what they're coming for, and if they incarnate, it's because this context, no matter how strange it may seem to them, contributes to their life purpose, or mind you, they come to support us on our journey from their love and compassion. I know what I want for these enormously turbulent times. What happens is that I see all of this is already stealing my peace. I'm finding it really hard to apply silence and compassion in the face of what's happening, which is exactly as you warned us from the beginning, that this would escalate. What else could I practice beyond non-consumerism, compassion, etc.? I believe that in what we've covered in this session, we've provided significant insights on this, especially when we talked about that inner perspective. from that connection with the spiritual dimensions that support us and with a series of reflections we've made, I hope it has helped to shed light on this issue. What can we do in the face of what is happening and what will happen? How can we maintain our balance? I think we also have this question answered in light of this looming situation that you've also laid out for us in this meeting. I really don't know what we can do. I feel disarmed. Because even though they are focused on their own things and we are focused on ours, I feel like I can't do anything to prevent what's coming. The transcendent aspect of being human is present within me. Christ Jesus is a pillar in my life, the connection and respect for Mother Earth, simple living, etc. But how can we escape from control, from the acceleration, from the impositions of the system and everything else? If the transcendent is within you, practice respect for Earth and simple living, coexisting with control and digitalization, live differently. That Christ Jesus is a pillar in your life, that you practice connection and respect for Mother Earth, habits like simple living, etc. Don't have any doubt that while coexisting with all those things you mentioned, control, digitalization, impositions, you will have room to maneuver and you'll find a way to live differently without falling into mere coexistence. Don't have any doubt. And along with that, my friend, I also want to say this. Please, we shouldn't avoid this. Let's not try to avoid what's coming. This birth is part of the process, and we shouldn't get so fixated on the birth itself, but rather on what comes from it. May our gaze from the heart and soul be more focused on what is about to be born, rather than on the contractions and upheavals of the birth. If a mom or a future mom, it would be absurd for her to focus all her attention on the contractions and the upheavals of the birth, but she has the confidence. What causes those upheavals and contractions? What are they going to do? Well, setting aside the differences, let this also be our guidance. Let this be our compass. I would like to have some guidance regarding your final question. And what do we do? The people around me who practice one of the institutionalized religions seem to have more external stability. However, I consider myself a free spirit because I perceive that these are too narrow and sometimes even have involutive traits. I feel lonely and vulnerable. How can we maintain trust in Teresa without the framework and structure of a religious system? In spirituality, dear friend, in spirituality, that fresh water that religious systems bring through the pipes, we forget about the pipes. Well, to anyone who wants to pay attention and operate within the realm of the pipes, please, my utmost respect. But what we have is pure water, which those pipes somehow want to direct, but they can't, because that pure water has an enormous strength. That pure water of spirituality, that pure water of what the wisdom of Christ Jesus has shown, what great sages and wise people have made available to us throughout the history of humanity, that is where we have to maintain confidence and integrity, not within the framework of structures of pipes, of dogmatic religions, but in the genuine spirituality that is in fact what is in the message and in the teachings of all these great masters, and in particular of this figure who is much more than a master, who is the Christ figure, who is the figure of Christ Jesus. In the face of so much fear, insecurity, and uncertainty, do you think that Father God always gives us some room to maneuver? For me, that phrase means tranquility, just like trusting, accepting, and not judging. Of course, there is always room to maneuver, free will. Virtue, and always is within our reach. Whether we make it our own or not depends solely on each one of us. In light of our reflection on what each of us wants, in my case, I believe that life can already be quite uncomfortable and sometimes difficult, but aside from cultivating myself, what I don't want is the suffering as it seems that is going to happen. Is there any way to avoid it in this physical plane? In short, let's not confuse pain with suffering. Just please, suffering is an emotion. Pain has to do with something physical or energetic. It has to do with something real. That the car has, that is pain. Suffering is sublimation. Suffering is elevating to a plane. That emotional pain then becomes something different, which is suffering. We have no reason to fall into suffering, dear friends. There may be pain in our lives due to some circumstance. Well, it may also be an illness that causes us pain. But the crux of the matter, as we have said so many times in many monthly meetings, is not what, but how we live what. We do not allow ourselves to live how we live what, to live it with suffering. And the best antidote to dilute suffering is trust in life, trust in ourselves, commitment to who we are, maintaining perseverance in this ever-growing presence of what we truly are, the soul affinities we can find, knowing that we are walking, many souls, even if we don't know each other, that we have relationships among us, we are walking on this precious path that leads to the new humanity, so that all this joy, all this trust, all this commitment, all this presence of who we are each day, and more, gains more strength in us. As the wind of the dystopian blows harder, may it strengthen in us the fortitude and presence of who we are. I live in Colombia, a country that has suffered a lot of violence and where there is so much inequality. As the wind of the dystopian blows harder, may it strengthen in us the fortitude and presence of who we are. I live in Colombia, a country that has suffered a lot of violence and where there is so much inequality. How can I energetically raise my vibrational frequency in the face of this reality that we are sharing, and we have insisted several times throughout this meeting? In this scenario of degradation and survival of the physical or material that has been presented to us for the coming years, wouldn't it be unreasonable to adopt protective measures for our closest ones, like stockpiling some supplies, owning weapons, or relocating to less populated areas? And where would you deposit or invest money now? Let's see. I'm not here to tell anyone what they have to do. If I remind you that in the sacred text it says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Weapons, please, weapons. We're talking about taking the step into the new humanity, and of course, we're not going to take that step by shooting other people, even claiming that there are a series of circumstances. No, please, weapons and violence are absolutely, definitely not the answer. Of course not. Stockpiling food, stockpiling supplies, I'm not one to say not to do it. But I present myself with a diatribe. If I stockpile supplies for a scarcity, what do I do when it happens? Do I keep them for myself while others starve, or share with the rest? Do I keep it stored for myself, knowing that outside people are starving? Is it just for me and mine, or what about the rest? If we carry out that behavior, it seems very clear to me that this has nothing to do with evolution, but rather with involution. It has nothing to do with compassion, but with selfishness. It has nothing to do with the new humanity, but with involution. Let's practice common sense. And regarding the topic of investing money, I can tell you clearly, it's a topic I'm very clear about. There is no safe place. Don't think about security in money investment, because there is nothing that offers security. Uncertainty and instability are constants in the economic realm, and they will become more and more prevalent. So each one, within their understanding, can choose one thing or another for deposits there in the bank without any type of risk, with a small interest rate or investments. Higher risk stocks, for example, but in any case, forget completely about the possibility of having security. There is no safe way to keep money right now, which is also, we have to see it from a positive point of view, because we have to be in a situation where all of this is lost, where all of this is gone, because even with regard to material goods, we have to be in a condition, even if it is mental, in a mental disposition, to be able to accept them. I am not saying that this is going to happen or that we necessarily have to experience it, but it is interesting that what may be fear of the insecurity of my savings, we also turn into a certain detachment precisely towards those savings. I think you're just getting the consciousness game I'm presenting here. But I repeat, I don't believe there is any type of investment currently on the planet, nor will there be, regarding the money that each person might have. I don't think there's anything that offers security, or at least the kind of security we would like to have. Obviously, the more profitability we seek, the more risk we take on. But beyond that economic principle, we all know insecurity, instability, and uncertainty characterize this path leading up to 2030 in the way we already discussed a week ago. In light of the upcoming events that will lead to an increase in the degradation of how humans are treated, as well as the production of devastating suffering through the plans of the elite and their accomplices, such as the governments of the nations of the world, are strong actions against this. Elite in defense of the integrity of defenseless people, not supported in any way by an evolutionary human conception. Or do you think we should take it as playing into the hands of the elites to implement Plan B? The compassion means action. Compassion is a mental idea. The compassion that is the background of love, this compassion that we have been insisting on, is not thoughts, are not mental ideas. They are facts. Compassion involves action. And obviously, compassionate action leads us to alleviate, to the best of our abilities, the pain we can see in our surroundings. And whatever we can do about it, let's do it. But please, let's not believe that by doing this, we will transform the system. That's the line we shouldn't cross. In my personal actions or with other people, in fact, I do it. I can do things within my means to alleviate pain and to ease that transformation of pain into suffering that so many people experience. I can alleviate pain and ease suffering, and what I can do, I do. And what I can do, I do thinking that I or others can do something to transform this system, so that the new world order doesn't happen, etc., etc. That gets us tangled up in the mess of Plan B. That's already going down the wrong path. And I believe that in discernment, common sense, and awareness, it's a reflection that each person has to make with themselves. We're almost done. For those of us who have some savings in the bank and intend to buy a home, what advice could you give us, considering what's coming in the next few years? Regarding the money in the bank, I've just mentioned it. When it comes to buying a home, it might be the best use of money right now. That is, whenever I need it. I am not advocating here to be a multi-owner now. I am not talking now about accumulation, hoarding, and speculation. No. It's simply if in our way of life we plan to buy a home, this is a good time to do it, even though in many countries prices are high. But certainly, putting the capital you have, putting the money you have into a physical asset is safer. It provides more security than keeping it in the realm of the financial system. The other day, I invested some savings I had in an investment fund, mainly to avoid losing money due to inflation and such. I was startled. I saw that it was managed by BlackRock, which apparently is the involutive elite in its purest form, with the wicked intention of leading our souls down the worst path. I think it's an example of how surrounded we are by corporations of this kind in every sense: pharmaceutical, political, economic, etc. The truth is, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. To start, what do I do? Should I self-fund? Let's see. Whether they call it a mutual fund or whatever they call it, the financial system, the money, for example, that banks have, banks invested. You can have a checking account, which is not a mutual fund, a checking account at the bank. The money in that checking account isn't just sitting there doing nothing. The bank is investing it, and it's investing it through channels that always handle mutual funds. Keep in mind that there are 11 major investment funds in the world, and out of those big ones, 11 investment funds, and among them, there are 4 that manage such a large amount that it's almost half of the world's economy. And the 11 largest are the ones that really move the global economy. BlackRock, which is mentioned, is the largest of them. BlackRock alone manages assets worth approximately over 10 trillion euros in total, with assets under management. Vanguard is next and manages assets amounting to around 8 trillion euros. And if we keep counting and go up to number 11, we realize that there are many, about 300. But if we look at the top 11, those top 11 dominate more than half of the planet's economy. But let's not be naive. A checking account, the bank, uses that money through channels that are in hand. If you use your money in a mutual fund, you're aware that it's being put into a mutual fund. Even if you have it in your checking account, the bank is using it through mutual fund channels. This was the reality we faced in the financial world. All asset management of any kind is in the hands of these big investment funds. Currently, with the advancement of artificial intelligence and digitalization in relation to the job market, studies and professions, could you comment on options for finding work? How do schools see this, since they provide so few resources? All right, I'm going to do something, since this topic of entering the future of the job market in light of everything related to artificial intelligence, etc. It's not just that it doesn't strictly relate to the meeting, which is a very broad topic in terms of explanation. Tomorrow, in the text that Kiko will send it to you, there will be a link to a study that, even though it's from the World Economic Forum, which is purely elite, I'm not doing this to promote it in any way. But it's a very current report, just a few days old, and it specifically analyzes the future of employment in the context of all this movement of artificial intelligence and technology that we are living. I think you have all the information there. I will send you a link to a Spanish language media outlet and the report, which is indeed in English. The news in Spanish, for those of you who don't speak English, can give you a hint about the direction of the content of that report. We're entering the last two questions, the last one in this block, and then we'll move on to experiences and sharing. The last one in this block, question 62. How would you approach life if you were living right now at 20 or 30 years old? Would you consider studying for a degree, having children, buying a home? How would you approach your life in the work field? What would your personal plan be for the coming years, given the certainties and uncertainties of what's to come? Well, the truth is, my friend, that I'm not between 20 and 30 years old. I'm many years older than that. And it's absurd. I can't put myself in the position of what I would do if I were 20 or 30 years old, because I'm not. And I think this is getting into mental games that lead us absolutely nowhere. Because no matter how much I try to think, what would I do if I were 20 or 30 years old? I'm doing that reflection with the age I have, and it's impossible that it doesn't influence my thoughts, no matter how much I might naively believe otherwise. The most important thing is that we are aware. As we said before, the issue isn't so much about age, but everything related to the driver, to the spiritual soul dimension. Rather than thinking about what I would do from a material standpoint, I would try to feel what my life purpose is, to know what makes me feel fulfilled, what I would like to do that brings me joy and fulfillment. And that's where I would try to focus my life. I don't know if that would mean studying for a degree or not. I don't know if that would mean buying a house or not. I don't know if that would mean having children or not. What I do, no. And if I were to go back to that age of 20 or 30, but of course with the reflection I'm doing now, which isn't exactly at that age, what I'm absolutely clear about is that we need to be consistent with our inner voice and always act in alignment with that inner voice. We need to be brave enough to act in accordance with that inner voice and have trust in life to always act in coherence with that inner voice, and also try to ensure that from that trust, our emotional world and our mental world are in the greatest harmony and alignment possible. If I were 20 or 30 years old in that sense, that's what I would do. And also try to ensure that from that trust, our emotional world and our mental world are in the greatest harmony and alignment possible. If I were in my 20s or 30s in that sense, that's what I would do. Which on the other hand is what I do now, that I don't exactly have that age. But I think that's the key. No matter what age you are, that inner voice, that deep calling from within, that life purpose, that which we know when we are realizing ourselves and living fully, or when we are drifting away from that, we often deceive ourselves. Many times we are afraid to carry it out, but that voice is there, and as much as possible, we always need to move forward so that it becomes a reality in our lives. And finally, we end up at question 63, the section on experiences and sharing. I have put it here, this contribution that a friend makes us, because it is enormously long. It takes up over a page. So I've included it here because I don't think it's really a question. In fact, if we go over the sharing, I would say there are dozens of questions scattered throughout It's worth approaching this with unconditional love. We drift away, but if we return, the Father is there with love, without reproach. And as a question about what they are experiencing, about their way of seeing and perceiving many things, which is underpinned by unconditional love, true love. Indeed, real love is unconditional love. It's a love that is always there, always present. It's the love that a father has for us, so to speak, like the parable of the prodigal son, where the father is always waiting for us. We drift away, we separate, but if at any moment we regain our sense, our awareness, and return home, the Father is always waiting for us with love and without any reproaches of any kind. That unconditional love, which is the love of God, is what we should always keep in mind in our modest way as we reflect on what this friend has shared with us. And at this point, friends, we've reached the end of this meeting. We've gone a few minutes over of the established time. I hope it was worth it, but I wanted to make sure I didn't leave any of the questions unanswered. And I remind you that very soon we will have the opportunity to see each other again. Specifically, we are talking about the monthly meeting for next February. We will have it, which is titled, we will have it on the first Thursday of February, the presentation, and on the third Thursday of February, the answers to the questions, and it is titled Wisdom, Knowledge, Discernment, Inspiration, and Intuition. Notice that 5 topics: wisdom, knowledge, discernment, inspiration, and intuition. These words appear in many monthly meetings. They show up a lot in the realm of consciousness, also in the New Age movement, in the spiritual supermarket. But what are they, and how are they similar, and how do they differ? And what is even more important, or equally important, what advice can we give ourselves to practice it, to integrate it into our lives? Practical advice that is useful to integrate wisdom, knowledge, discernment, inspiration, and intuition into our lives. To that, friends, we will dedicate the monthly meeting for next February, which will have the first Thursday on the 6th for the presentation, and on the 20th for the answers to your questions. Thank you very much, friends. It's always truly a pleasure to share with you all your presence, your energetic support, the soul affinity that we are cultivating in these meetings. Thank you very much from the heart, and thank you very much from the soul. And likewise, Kiko, thank you very much for your work. A big hug.
A hug, Emilio. See you in 3 weeks. Goodbye, all.